Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted and privileged to have a conversation with Antony Randall. Hey, Antony, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Fritz. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. Now, let me introduce Andy to the listeners. You're based out of California. You have a background. You started off as an engineer, but you are a veteran in the music industry. So you worked as a producer engineer with artists like Black Eyed Peas, Lady Gaga, Beyonce, Coldplay, Drake, U2, Rihanna, and more. Now, that's a very impressive list. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about your role as a co-founder and CEO of Planet Home. So again, Antony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Fritz. Thank you.
Even if Planet Home is the main theme, I still want to very briefly touch on your work, working with all these great global artists, because you left that behind. But how was it to work in that environment? What did it bring you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't do too many interviews, so I'm not don't have a whole litany of things. But I just a very brief history. I started originally as an engineer, audio engineer, and quickly moved from that into technical management, managing departments, and then from that into overseeing departments, and actually ended up in the touring industry after a short spell in the theatre business. But I was just very fortunate, very lucky that I ended up with a passion for both the arts and logistics and engineering, and the three things went together, and I ended up in what they call the live entertainment space mainly, but touched on lots of different stuff through that 15, 20 years, making content in all different types, as we would call it now. Creative or influencer space, which is all types of content. So, I produced, directed, and worked on multiple different things in the live space, from TV shows to large scale touring, from, in England and America and across the world, to shows in China and Australia and Africa. So I was very fortunate to be given a career that some of my clients and friends gave me. So yeah, very fortunate.
But that also means that you have extensively traveled the globe as well.
Yeah. That business. So I was based in London for the first part of my career up until the late 90s. And then in the early 2000s, I was based globally up until 2015. So I spent 15 years really from like 99 to 2000 all the way through to 2014, 15. I was in what they call international global touring. So that was running global touring events and media for a number of global artists. So most of my travel was every day on a plane, every day, traveling around the world, producing shows in pretty much every region in the world.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the context. That was your job. But then at a certain point, you said, I'm going to start Planet Home.
Yeah, well, I'll take you back actually before I started my career as in the live entertainment space or the live media space, because it started in theatre actually before I went into the entertainment space. But growing up, I was very interested in the space of equality, and growing up in one neighborhood and kind of going to school in a different neighborhood, there was an inequality that I grew up in, and in 1985, Bob Geldof launched Live Aid. And it was the most inspiring thing for me to see how music could engage a world at scale so fast. And we were, this is, I think, 1985, I want to say. And so music was changing a lot. I was at, in America, it's high school. In England, of course, it's senior school. And so that last few years of school before college or university. And I was just like really fascinated by this space, right? This space where music and arts and culture could move us all towards equality. And so I think that was my full inspiration, was that can I work in that space? And so knowing that you need to get a job in order to pay the bills, you know, the route for me was, well, if I could become an engineer in that space, then at least I could get paid. So I moved to London to study sound engineering, with the hopes that one day that I'd actually work specifically in the space of non-profits, really using music and art to save the world. It never happened, really. Actually, I worked on a bunch of non-profits over the years, and I worked a very small amount, you know, like let's say worked, I mean, I helped along the way in that 15, 20 years of my career, and always tried to work in the non-profit space, but I couldn't find really the sustainability aspect of it, where we use the word sustainability now to talk about the planet, but that could be in anything. In most non-profits, I found that they found it very difficult to sustain their existence. I actually worked on one of my first events that I did as a manager, as an engineer, was working for Jimmy Page in London, and his wife at the time, for a non-profit called Task Brazil. Brazilian focused non-profit, and it had some amazing people. Emily Cash, Pat Cash's wife, was working on it too. And it was my first insight into really working on a cultural piece of non-profit where culture and non-profits come together. But what I found difficult for them was the ongoing funding of the non-profit. It wasn't the one event, it was actually after the event. And so it was an eye-opener for me of like, oh, wow, well, maybe I got it wrong. You know, the event itself isn't really the thing, it's everything else happens afterwards. Roll forward to 2007. At this point, I'm now the head of touring for a band called Black Eyed Peas. The head of production, so that's the technical side. I got to work with, still to this day, you know, sort of 11 of the most inspiring people that helped shape my career. will.i.am as a leader, thought leader, and also just a human, and Seth and Polo, who worked with Seth and Will, and then the whole team, Fergie, Tab, and Apple, and the band. And you know, there was only a handful of us when we started, and we went around the world looking at these causes firsthand. So I went from the sort of observer of it and the understander of it to the being inside it, and seeing these countries firsthand, and the impact that music and culture had. But my takeaway really still was that the application of change wasn't there. Like the idea of change, the inspiration was there, but what wasn't happening is that we weren't really seeing change. And in 2007, the Black Eyed Peas were invited to perform at Live Earth in London, and still really in my heart wanted to work in the non-profit space, but my career is now at this point very busy. And thanks to again, you know, the fortunate luck I had of being sort of had these great leaders that I had worked for. And I thought Live Earth was going to be the second version of Live Aid, and actually was going to fix these global planetary issues. And I'd only really been starting to learn about them in that few years, you know, like mid-2000s, about the real planet issues. Started to read out some books, started to do some basic understanding, but I'm not a scientist, so what do I know? I can only read the same as everybody else. And in 2007 came around, and I realized actually after Live Earth, and that went away pretty quickly, they made Tony Wall and Al Gore did such an amazing job, and I still think today Al Gore is an unsung hero for this planet. People don't understand the importance of the work that him and Tony did. It will hopefully start to resonate now, and we can talk about COP later, but you know, you're starting to see this same message that they were saying the whole way through this journey is now starting to finally come through in messaging. But the messaging I felt in 2007-8 was more about the disaster, the world's ending, you know, the oil companies, anti this, anti that. And so 2007, you know, 8, 9, I'm still focused and really interested, but I'm still now working in the entertainment space. And, you know, I'd gone from this one small band called the Black Eyed Peas and a bunch of British bands to, you know, Rihanna, and now Rihanna's a global superstar and the Black Eyed Peas are a global superstar, and I was managing both them projects. And then, you know, then I got fortunate enough to work with Lady Gaga for a while, and then Jay-Z. So like the corporate side kept on growing. But I was getting further and further distanced away from, I think, what I originally actually really wanted to work on, which was cause-based culture. By 2012, I hadn't really done anything, to be honest. When I look back, I realized that all the stuff I wanted to work on didn't really happen, and all the stuff that I wanted, my passion was still working, right? My for-profit stuff was working, it was going well. But my non-profit ideas of what I wanted to do from from a young person didn't really materialize. And I actually read an interesting book called Abundance, and I always get the year mixed up because it was somewhere in 2012, 13. I'd also been a big fan of a non-profit called Invisible Children, which was fighting for water end in northern Uganda. And I'd been out there. And one thing that for my career was that I was able to go and see everything myself. So I'd been to all these regions. I spent time in Uganda. I'd gone to see Gulu. I'd seen where the war was. Like, I traveled to China. I mean, I'd been around the world and seen these things firsthand. So I had less of an academic understanding and more of a first-hand human experience understanding. And in 2012, 13, I started to, and I was, as an engineer still, I was super fascinated on software, engineering, AI, the future of the planet, technology. And there was an organization called Singularity University out of San Francisco that had been partnered up with NASA and was working a lot on a lot of AI future, exponential change. And I picked up this book by an author, Stephen Kotler and Peter Diamandis. And it was really focused on this idea of abundance. How do you move from, it doesn't exist to it does exist? And I started to think about the fact that all the nonprofits I worked with, they didn't really have the capital or the scale to solve big problems like, say, Microsoft or Google, but they cared. And then the big corporations, they were carrying so much overhead and weight, right? The corporate model wasn't working. And the nonprofit model wasn't working. And one of the things that did come up a lot, and I think anyone that works in the activist space, like the space of like fighting for just causes, can get marginalized very quickly. Now it's changed with social media. Greta Thunberg has proved that, now there is a voice and everyone can have a voice, thank God, finally. But back then, like, there wasn't the voice of the people coming through. We didn't have Arab Spring at that point. It hadn't really broken through. So if you were in a non-profit and there was a large corporation that didn't really want to hear your voice, it was very easy for them to get rid of you. So I felt like the activist space was marginalized. I felt the non-profit space and the NGO space, which are what I call direct-to-community critical programs, get marginalized. Then there was all this red tape, by the way, in the government organization that stopped them from scaling. And then you had the innovation business of the internet, right? And the Internet of Things, now scaling AI robotics. And I'm like, well, surely somewhere between them two worlds, we've kind of missed the point. And then when I read Abundance, and then they did another book called Bold, I was like, this is what I think it is. It's like exponential technology, with environmental solutions, right, could start to give us some change. But then you'd still need to think about social and cultural impact, right? Because at the end of the day, it's still the community itself that's impacted, right? Specifically in the environment space. And so we started to shape the idea of Planet Home, which was originally called Creating Equilibrium. And from 13, 14 and 15, I stayed in the entertainment business. By 16, I think my son was born in 2013. And by 16, I'd moved over, really, to be honest, and kind of moved over to this idea of working in this space. So that's the backdrop.
It's a great story, which for me shows you had a vision, and it took some time before we were able to execute on that vision, and now Planet Home exists. By the way, it's an extremely appropriate name because you just shared with us that the planet was indeed your home. You were traveling in all those countries, so you saw firsthand where you lived from a planet perspective, I'd say. So so you founded Planet Home. Planet Home, it's a nonprofit, but is it a movement, an NGO? What do you do? How are you using Planet Home, and how is it organized?
Great questions. Well, I think Planet Home found me. I don't think I founded Planet Home. The organization of Planet Home was actually birthed by a lot of different people. In fact, Stephen Kotler, who wrote the book, became one of my dearest friends in 2016, and was actually right at the beginning of this journey, was very much involved the whole way through. And so a lot of the work that we did when we started out was around trying to bring these different thinkers together. My still co-founder, Gabrielle Hull, had a background in finance and software. Stephen was obviously an author, had done countless amounts of research on the subject matter. We in our first conference, in fact, how we met was through Neil Sahoda. We got Neil to come out in 2017. So Neil was one of the sort of original thinkers, along with a guy called Robert Suarez. So, and we invited a bunch of scientists and engineers out to the very first meetup we had in 2017. So I think I would almost say that Planet Home found me. I didn't find and/or found Planet Home. They never thought about this to this moment. It's like, this is really a journey, and it's a daily journey, and it changes every day because the world changes so fast. And so we have really three components of Planet Home. We have what we call our community side, which you guys would class as an NGO nonprofit, which is direct to community actions. Okay. That's where we think that, we have to move away from eyeballs and move to action, because without, some real work being done, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So the sort of part of the platform is what we call the culture side. Is like, the concert business is an actions business. You buy a ticket, you go, you dance, right? So it's really taking the action that we would normally do in entertainment and just tying that into doing some good deeds, good work, whether that is you doing some composting, or whether that's you eating one less meat meal, or whether you're going to do a beach cleanup, or whether you go read, learn, watch. The community part of the platform is really about direct to community engagement and singly and collectively. So it's really about empowering that. So we do a lot of editorial work on with a bunch of students. We have about 25, 30 writers that write daily for us on the student side. Okay. We think that there is important for the student university world of youth to empower themselves and empower us with their information, so that we can see their viewpoint, right? Because their viewpoint, and we all remember this being younger, and for the younger generation, when you get older, it's what I always say, and I always say this to my nieces and nephews who are young, it's like, when you're at the bottom of the hill looking up, it looks one way, and when you're at the top of the hill looking down, it looks another way. It makes neither of them right or wrong. It just means they're very different perspectives. Yep. So if you ask a 5-year-old what it looks like to be 5, it's true what 5 looks like to them. And if you ask a 50-year-old what it looks like to be 50, it's true to them being 50. And at that particular moment in time, from that particular moment in space, wherever you are in the world, depending on the challenge you're looking at, it will look very differently. So we've always tried to have a perspective of there's no necessarily, this person's right or this person's wrong. It was more about what are we trying to solve and how can we solve it, regardless if you're 5 or 50. So from the left-hand side, it's always been about perspective. And we've also wanted to simplify how we spoke about things. So the framework that we developed was really about enabling us to have an entrance point to information that can enable anybody to go on a journey. And so the framework of Eat, Make, Move, Live that you'll see on the website on the left-hand side was really designed for people like me that weren't scientists, right? That wanted to understand how my personal impact on the planet every day was happening. And then could I go from a simple, question of how does my food affect the planet? And then could I build enough information to do research and data in a fun, interesting way? So the left-hand side of the platform was always about stories and events that drive information, that give you the access to the data point that comes next in the research journey. So left is all about community.
So it's how big, by the way, how many people are now a member of your community, the Planet Home community?
Oh, well, it depends if we talk about socially. I mean, we get millions and millions of people socially, all the way into our social platforms at, 500,000 plus on our social platforms, into, the 30, and on the consumer side, what we call community side, into the 30, 40,000 businesses on the network side. So, into, the 1,000 odd people that have contributed somewhere along the way, artists, designers, engineers, scientists, technologists that have helped shape the platform. So it was, in a way, always built by the people around it, developed by the people around it. So the middle part of the platform has always been sort of decentralized in a way where it's like we do the work on the community side and we do the work on the business network side, and then the middle bit sort of works itself out in a way.
So, so at the end of the day, you provide an infrastructure, you facilitate change for a better planet. So you bring people together. And
I think we fundamentally believe that every solution exists and they're just a choice between solution A and solution B. And some people don't have a choice and some people do. right? And so if you're a refugee that's coming out of a crisis, you have a different set of choices than if you're living in California or if you're living
That's
in
the
London.
perspectives you talked about from the 5-year-old and 50-year-old. That's their truth, and that's
That's true to them where they are.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I do believe that you have optimism, and you can be optimistic or pessimistic, right?
Yes.
And I believe that if you're sitting in either of them two buckets, you could have a problem either being too optimistic and not real, or being too real and not optimistic enough. So we just believe that if we can convert everybody over to the idea of being a solutionist, focus on the solution space.
That's indeed a term which I read on you. Is anybody in that community a solutionist, or is that a subset within the community?
No, anyone can be a solutionist, right? I mean,
So
we really believe, I believe this, right? I just generally believe that anyone can be a solutionist, just whether you, no matter who you are, you can be a scientist, engineer, mum and dad, a daughter or sister. I think anyone has the ability to solve problems. It just depends on if they want to. And I think if you have a change of mindset, you can change anything, right? And so I just think that, and I'm a dad, so I have an 8-year-old. And like every parent, we spend all day long trying to learn how to be better parents. And generally, we get better parents by listening to our kids. But my biggest worry and concern, honestly, in this last 5 years, and what I've seen a lot, is, and one thing to remember, of course, for anyone that's younger than me, that's maybe in their teens, is that when I was in my teens, I didn't listen to my parents because there was a divide in education between me and my parents and my mum. So my biggest question to myself throughout this whole journey was, how am I going to best help my son stay connected and learn together and see each other eye to eye throughout his life, where we could learn together and grow together in a very, very sensible way, where I can learn as much from him as he can from me, so the system of generation didn't get lost. And so I've spent a lot of time in like asking myself that question. I think it comes down to a very simple idea, which is like, if I speak to my son about solutions, about any problem, and he has a better solution than I do, then we should take that one. And if I have a better solution than he does, we should take that one. And it doesn't matter then about how old you are, how rich you are, how poor you are. The thing that solves the problem is the thing that we need. And right now, we need more solutions to the environmental crisis that we have than we've ever needed. But if we're in complete fear and anxiety, right, like we can't get anything done. And if we keep believing in things that aren't true, we can't get anything done. So there's that space in the middle, right, that I think we have to live in, which is sort of this solution space. And so that's where solutionists came from. It was we didn't want to set fire to the system, and we didn't want to agree to the corporate system. We wanted to innovate somewhere where innovation was critical to it, and we think that's what was important.
I really get that. Time's moving very fast. I still have a couple of questions for you, Anthony. First of all, from your very extensive background in the entertainment industry, what are the lessons learned you've taken from the entertainment industry and brought that to where you are right now at Platinum Home?
One part is definitely the ability to move culture and people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the music space has a great understanding of culture and people and how to communicate. So there's definitely a cultural communication piece there. I think that's going to be important to where we go. I think understanding that everybody's culture is important, no matter where they come from and who they are. So really understanding the cultural piece was quite important. I was fortunate enough to be involved in very large scale operations, logistics and finance. So, you know, in all countries around the world. So that's been really helpful just to understand like, how does this large system work, right, at scale, and fast as well, because, you know, we're running, you know, shows every day. So that the logistics side helped a lot, the culture side helped a lot. And then really at the end of the day, if you're really passionate about anything, you know, you may not have a clue what you're doing, which I didn't when I started Planet Home, but if it was important enough to me to do, right, seeing my son, then it needed to get done. And I may not have been the right person to do it. I certainly wasn't the most educated and well-read person to be in this space. I certainly wasn't, you know, I just feel like, honestly, everybody's really smart. I think the problem is that we've got a lot of smart people in this world. In fact, everyone's smart. Everyone has the same access to the same tools. And if you give the power to everybody and the information to everybody, I think a lot of smart decisions can be made. And I think the people will make the decisions and they will make the change.
That's so true, and as a vision. I do have triggers me now. I had the honor in 2019 to be a speaker at your Planet Home event in San Francisco, which I enjoyed very much. So I saw great artists on stage entertaining people, interlinked with Bill Nye, the science guy, talking about we need to save this planet. To what extent do you see that that some people see this as still entertainment or maybe infotainment? I'm also thinking about, you just mentioned Live Aid as a great example. Although for me now also Live Aid is the scene in the Bohemian Rhapsody movie where Queen does a gig. So it's more about the entertainment side rather than the serious message where the entertainment is being used for. So what's your view?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a really great question. So I think if we sort of break it into a couple of pieces, right? So one, for everybody, every day life is hard, right? And we for some reason, a life that we should be in abundance of, like it's not hard to walk outside, and walk around and see the sea, the sun, the flowers, like they exist everywhere. The planet is a beautiful place, but we've decided to build another beautiful place, which is called the industries we built, the industrial era.
Yeah.
And so the natural world that was the world that we were fascinated by, apples, trees, oranges, birds, that natural world, which should be a stimulation for us, didn't become as a stimulation as the industrial world that we built. And so what I find fascinating is that we've created a world where we need entertainment to escape from the world we live in. So entertainment is a place of escapism, right? It's where you go to get away from work, homework, schoolwork, whatever the work you're doing, the drama at home, the crisis, too much space, whatever it is, or wherever you live, right? It's like if you live in Afghanistan right now, I'm sure if you're able to go get some Bach or Mozart or some Kendrick Lamar or Jay-Z or some Katy Perry, whichever your flavor, you may be able to be for a moment in time where you don't live there. There's a moment in time where that music, that art, that communication from the artist moves you from where you are to somewhere else. And the power that we talk about a lot, and we hear this a lot from the artist community about the ability to move someone, does move them for that moment in time, right? And sometimes, by the way, that music, that artist can actually influence the other person at the other end to actually become an artist too. Every artist has been influenced by somebody. Piano players, singers, songwriters, musicians, artists, sculptors, all inspired by someone at some point. So the art part, the entertainment part, always had an ability to really infect us, right? Really change us. And that experience with it, once you go to a concert, or Meow Wolf is one of my favorite experiences in the world. And Chadney Everett, who's a dear friend who we just went out to see him in Denver. What they've done with Meow Wolf is use art and experience to transform people to a different place, right? So there's this great statement on one of Kendrick's albums. And it says, I don't dream here. So he's in one place. And I think art has that ability. The tie line, though, to change and being a change agent is the actual work of cleaning up the planet and fixing the planet. That's hard work. So if you're fixing the planet, you still might need to escape. So we've got to be careful that each one of them things does a different thing. So if you're just there to have a good time and you're just there to be entertained, then that should be your right just to be entertained. And if I start asking you then to do a bunch of work in your classroom while playing the music, the two things are completely right now not in the same space. And I think that we have to be able to treat them correctly, which is if you're going to be in a space of freedom, and I don't dream here to be inspired, which we need, then that needs to exist. But it can still tie back to, and this is what we should go do with that inspiration, which is the actions we have to do, which can then be tied back to, I think, businesses that really will make a difference on the planet. So I think you can do it, but you can't lose sight of what that does. You can't just keep sort of drumming, like the freedom of inspiration into action without understanding that the two things may not fit the person at the time. So they just got to be given the right space and time, I think, like Planet Home in 2019.
Hey, got that. Hey, Antony, got two more questions. First of all, you've just described that Planet Home is quite a large global community. Now, in my experience managing and setting up communities myself, one of the things I've always advised is once you have your own community, connect yourself to other communities. So I was wondering, what are the communities you connect Planet Home to?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of us, what we did was we kind of looked at, if I can jump to the SDGs real quick.
Yes.
And then maybe we can do SDGs and I'll do this and we're going to COP. Maybe that's a good way to think about it. But so community means everything to everybody, right? There is 1 billion communities in the world. And I actually think everybody wakes up every day wanting to do good. I don't think there's a single person that doesn't wake up every day trying to do good and live better. And so really what we said first and foremost was, well, from the consumer side, from the community side, from us side, we have to simplify down the type of communities. So we looked at the food systems, which is sort of like what we describe as EAT, right? So we looked at the food system, said, okay, what are the communities that are helping food systems? And then we went to, okay, great. So that's the food systems. Can we get the whole planet into something as simple as 3 or 4 words? And that's what we came up with. Well, you got eat for food systems, you got make for every product we make in the world, you got move and you got live. And then we wanted networks and communities on both sides. So then if you look at the sectors underneath that, and this is a pretty relevant one today, is like clean transportation, new fuel sources are at the forefront right now of the conversation for the transition. Virtual connections, which during the pandemic became so critical, right? And then ecological exploration, they sit on the business network and research and science side of the platform. So on the left-hand side, the consumer can think of networks, communities as communities that are helping us eat better, communities that help us move better, communities that help us live better, and communities that help us make better. So these are all the people in communities, and we connect them communities together on the community side into what we call direct action. And then on the right-hand side, we connect the business sectors, which are a lot more deeper, but that might be in clean transportation, right? That might be battery companies or car companies. It might be under live, sustainable communities or biodiversity, companies working in them sectors and areas. So on the left-hand side, we have a lot of communities that are working together to take direct action. On the right-hand side, we have a lot of business networks that are working together to build businesses that help the planet.
Great, got that. So different communities for different parts of what Planet Home is looking for. Final question, Antony, and I'm sorry time is moving so quickly in this great present, because this was quite an inspiring discussion I had with you. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
Yeah, it's a good one. It gets hard, right, for all of us every day. I am going, I've got, you know what I'll do actually, give me 2 seconds. I'm going to read something to you that I wrote, that was written by the team here, which has been a good sort of guiding light for me actually over the last few years. Because inspiration comes in different places. I'd say definitely my community, my family, like all of us, the people around us. But my inspiration has always sort of been in the same space a little bit. So let me just read you a little quote, a little mantra. Change your mindset and we can change anything. How we eat, make, move and live. We have the chance of a lifetime and it's ours to take. The status quo has been shaken. We need to leave behind how things were done, leave behind our ways of thinking as we begin to move forward. We need to culture a new journey, culture love, culture values, culture solutions. So I would say that what inspires me the most is that we can change anything. We built the world, we destroyed the world, now we can fix the world. And that ability that it's possible and that solutions exist is what inspires me every day.
Antony, such a great way to end this great conversation. Antony, I want to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your background, your vision on what we can do to create a better planet, to fix it again. Antony Randall, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fritz.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.